Good evening, and welcome to our Monday, February 6, 2023 Committee of Adjustment meeting. I'll call it to order at 5:31. I guess all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, so it'll be open at 5:30. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? None, seeing none. All right, the approval of the agenda as it was presented. Is there anything any adjustments required?
No, Mr. Chair.
No, seeing none. All right, well then we'll move to Ms. Haley to go through the presentations.
No, the approval of the minutes.
Oh, the approval of the previous minutes. Sorry, I missed those. Yep. Perfect. Any opposed? Seeing none. Perfect. Ms. Haley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Committee of Adjustment meeting. Any person may attend this hearing and or make written or verbal representation, either in support of or in opposition to the proposed minor variance. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions at this hearing before the minor variance is decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the minor variance of the Committee of Adjustment of the Ontario Land Tribunal, also known as OLT. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a hearing or make written submissions to the Committee of Adjustment or the Township of South Glengarry before the minor variance is decided upon, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OLT unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. So we have two applications before us this evening. Our first one of the year is A0123. I would invite Mr. Wilson to attend to the table as he is the designer representing the property owner for this file. So this property is located at the east part of Lot 9, Concession 1 front, in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry, and it's known as, or addressed as, 19406 County Road 2. The subject property is 0.91 acres in area, and this is a map of where the property is located. You can see the property is highlighted in black. Located on the south side of County Road 2 and along the St. Lawrence River. So the committee may be familiar with this property as we recently heard a minor variance application to support a proposed addition, and that application was approved. And during the site visits and the review of that application, it was discovered that a shed had been brought to the property and placed on the property, and this would be a prefab, pre-manufactured, some people refer to them as Amish-type sheds that was placed. And it's not uncommon for members of the public to do that, especially when they realize that under 15 square meters for a shed, you don't trigger a building permit. You often don't realize or think that you do still need to conform to zoning. So the reason for the minor variance application this evening is to request a reduction in the watercourse setback from 30 meters to 4.28 meters from the watercourse to the southwest corner of the existing shed. In the previous minor variance to support the addition, the applicant had invested in a study called an environmental impact study. And the purpose of that study was to look at the provincially significant wetland that surrounded the subject property to determine if any development that was proposed would impact the provincially significant wetland or the body of water, or the water course, from an ecological perspective. So that study was then updated to accommodate this shed and make sure that the shed was not going to add any negative impact. So the drawing that's on the screen before you, I realize this is difficult to see in this type of setting, but you'll see the shed is located at kind of the bottom right-hand side of the portion of the drawing, and we do have a more close-up image here. And as I mentioned, it is existing, and it's located, the closest part of that shed is along the canal that would be on the west side of the parcel of property. And we do have a couple of images here. So this photo was recently taken, taken on January 27th, and you can see there's lots of snow on the ground, so maybe not as easy to see. When our bylaw officer installs the sign, she will often take photos of the sites the day of the sign installation. And then we have another image here, and the purpose of this image is to show the shed on the right-hand side, and here it is when you zoom in a little bit. So again, really hard to tell when there's snow on the ground. It's hard to tell the differentiation between the property where the canal is and where the river is. So we have taken some images that were out of the environmental impact study to help show kind of a better layout of where the house and the shed is. So on this photo, it's much easier to be able to see where the shed is placed. Again, it's placed close to the side of the canal, and this was taken in April 2002 by the environmental company. And then we have one more photo that would show it on a slightly different angle. So as I mentioned previously, that a study had been completed, and the purpose of that study was to look at any potential impacts that the existing shed could bring to the watercourse and if it could be mitigated. The study came back recommending that there was no concerns with the shed. It was reviewed by the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, and they had no concerns based on what was identified in that study. So the subject property is designated rural settlement area in the county official plan, and the application conforms to the general intent of the official plan. And the property is zoned residential 1 as well as floodplain holding, and it conforms to the general intent of the zoning bylaw. We do have a zoning map here, and you can see that quite a bit of the property is located within the floodplain based on our mapping. This has been reviewed and compared with our more up-to-date LiDAR information, and the Conservation Authority was satisfied with not only the placement of the proposed structure that we discussed previously, but as well as where the shed is going to be placed. We did circulate the application to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, and the comments that we received are as follows: that the RSCA has reviewed the application and supporting documentation for the above-mentioned minor variance under their authority to comment on natural hazards, Source Water Protection, and Conservation Authority Act permitting. We do not have any objections to the minor variance as worded. And the application was also circulated to the United Counties of SD&G Transportation Department. They reviewed it and commented that they had no concerns with the placement and the location of the shed. So we've also circulated to all abutting property owners within 60 meters. I've not received any written or verbal comments to date. And we have reviewed the application, and the Planning Department supports the application and recommends it to be approved, as the environmental impact study has determined that there's no ecological impacts to the watercourse or the provincially significant wetland caused by the shed, and the RCA supports the application. The committee members may have noticed that some of the language has changed a little bit in the recommendations, and that's because of the role of the Conservation Authority has changed based on recent legislation, whereby what they can review versus what they're no longer permitted to review. So they are looking at this from a natural hazard perspective. And we still did have the benefit of them having reviewed the environmental impact study previously for the proposed addition. If that occurred now, they're no longer able to review that study. That would be something that would have to be sourced out to a qualified individual. So I know I'm getting a little off topic, but I just wanted to put that into perspective for the committee members in case you noticed some difference in wording. So that's all I have for this application, Mr. Mayor. I know there's quite a few people in the audience this evening, so I'm not sure exactly who everyone is and which neighbor they are to whom, so maybe there's questions from the public, as well as Mr. Wilson can add any information that I may have missed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Haley. Are there any questions of the committee members at present? Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. Just a little bit of more detail on the shed. I don't know if that goes to you, Ms. Haley or Mr. Wilson, but am I correct in that shed it's like on a gravel base? It's not that they didn't build a foundation for it. It's essentially like a temporary shed that can be easily moved. Is that correct?
Just for, we do stream online, so whenever you answer, just be sure to, yeah.
That's correct, yeah.
All right, are there any questions of members of the public for this or comments from neighbors? All right, Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve as presented, seeing no other comment or question.
Okay, I see that Deputy Mayor Lang has seconded it. So all those in favor as it stands? Any opposed? Seeing none, all right, carried. We'll move on to the next application, A0223, Tarango.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to application A0223. This is a property that's located on Lot 4 on Registered Plan 14M10 in the geographic township of Charlottenburg, now in South Glengarry, and it's addressed as 6860 Craig Road in Glenwalter. The subject property is 0.91 acres in area. For those of you who know this area, several years ago it had gone through a fairly extensive Planning Act process whereby 13 cottages that were on leased land ended up becoming on 13 cottages on individually owned parcels, both through a combination of a subdivision and common elements condominium. So we now have a separate clear legal title for each parcel. So the parcel that's identified in black on the screen is the parcel that we're dealing with this evening. And the purpose of going through that process at that time was to gain clear title, as well as to establish a larger building envelope opportunity so that when the property owners decided to rebuild, they would be required to meet today's rules, such as the 30-meter watercourse setback. They would be pushed further away from the site. So if any of you have driven down there, you will see a combination of a few new homes that are respectful of the new subdivision design, and then some existing cottages that may or may not be redeveloped. So the purpose of the application this evening is the property owner is constructing a single detached dwelling. And these properties are very narrow. They're tight. It's not an easy configured lot to get a lot of flexibility for designs in. So one of the requirements of our building official when we end up having development in tighter lots is to request a building location survey to see if they actually have been able to build within the permitted setbacks. So in this particular case, the building location survey came back and they were slightly off. So you'll see the purpose of the application is to reduce the interior side yard setback from the limited services residential exception 6 zone from 1.2 meters to 1.12 meters. And I did calculate this into feet just so it would put it into a little bit more perspective, because not everyone can relate to meters really quickly. So it ends up working out to be approximately 3.2 inches that they were off, which unfortunately required them to go through this process. So looking at this image that's provided, that is a survey that was completed, and the bottom of the screen shows the location of the St. Lawrence River. And so then the side where I highlighted the measurements in yellow is the side that we would be looking for relief on, which would be really the northwest side of the property. It's kind of an odd angle as you come in there and turn, so the directions are not a perfect north-south direction, but that's the area of land that we're talking about, as well as here's a different image that was provided by their designer. This orientation is the opposite, whereby the bottom of the screen is Craig Road. You'll see the placement of the structure on the subject property, and then you can see the areas highlighted in red where they've gone over the permitted setback. So here's some current images again that were taken on January 27th, so you can see that the house is under construction. Each property has to respect a 1.2 meter side yard setback, so you can see the proximity to the abutting property to the, I'm going to call it the west. And we do have a more close-up image here of what the structure looks like. So the property is designated rural district in the county official plan, and the application does conform to the general intent of the official plan. And the property is zoned limited services residential exception 6 and floodplain holding, and it does conform to the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Here is a zoning map. You'll see the bright yellow represents the limited services residential zone. And at the very bottom of the highlighted lot is a very narrow area of floodplain where that property has the potential of flooding. So it's not anywhere near where the dwelling is proposed. We did circulate this application to the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, and they provided the following comments: that they reviewed the application under their authority to comment on Natural Hazard Source Protection and Conservation Authority Act. We do not have any objections to the proposed minor variance as worded. The application was also circulated to all abutting property owners within 60 meters and applicable municipal staff. We have received one written comment to date from the abutting property owner, and their comments pertain specifically to drainage. I am going to read those comments as part of the public meeting. So the comments that were received by email were from Nancy and Bill Lister, who would be the property owners to the west, which would be the same side as where the minor variance is being applied for. So the proximity of the house to the neighbors is not a concern worth significantly rectifying. The concern is limited to addressing appropriate drainage. In the absence of being able to review any kind of pre-existing drainage plan on the affected side, the shed-style roofing, which leans towards the space between two houses, will cause an area of 1/9 the size of the roof to absorb any participation and is likely to overwhelm the area without a mitigation strategy. Therefore, they're requesting us to consider the following. The use of a drainage ditch/swale pitched at an angle of approximately 2 degrees running from the front of the house to the rear. We also consider the installation and maintenance of an eave trough on the affected side with downspouts directed away from the area between the houses. And the third point is the installation and maintenance of appropriate snow rakes or guards on the affected sides should manage snow sliding onto the affected area. And any other strategies are welcome. So when we receive these comments, the closing point is, at no time do these suggestions wish to delay the building or occupancy of the Toronto's new home. So it's important for us to receive comments like this during a public process. It's important for people to feel they're heard. And we were able to review this with our building staff today. Our building staff did pull their building permit application. For the committee members who may not be aware, when you're building in a plan of subdivision, there is an existing grading and drainage plan. Grading and drainage plans that are designed for an overall subdivision are not always really detailed. So at the submission stage of a building permit application, we do ask for more specific details on a lot. The building staff did review it today. They've made note of this in the file, and they feel that these are suggestions that they can work with or that are already being proposed based on the grading and drainage plan. So knowing that, we didn't feel any concerns that we couldn't work with the neighboring property owner and mitigate it, as well as with the current property owner and contractor. We did circulate to everybody within 60 meters. We only received these one comments, and following this review, Planning and Building Department doesn't have any major concerns, and we support that the application be recommended to be approved, given its minor in nature. So I'm sure if there's any questions, we can answer them. The homeowners are here, so they probably know so much more than I would in terms of the details of their development, but we'll do our best to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Haley. If you want to present anything further, and if not, I can go to council for questions.
Just to let everybody know, we are, again, the suggestions of the eavesdropping and the swale and the direction of the water is actually in our plans as well. And we are going to be installing the roof, because it's a tin roof and it is sloping towards Bill and Nancy's. We will be putting in the ice dam, the larger one, in fact, to make sure that nothing is affected.
Okay, thank you. Questions, having heard that, Councillor Jaworski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor McDonald. It's a question for Ms. Haley. Because it's on the south side of County Road 2 and it's less than an acre, isn't it automatically subject to site plan control?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we don't put properties through site plan control who have gone through a subdivision design. And the reason for that is because almost everything that would be required in a site plan through that process has already been pre-engineered, predetermined to establish building envelopes, septic locations, setbacks, etc. And that's part of our bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I guess when you had mentioned that because it was subdivision and there was drainage, but I got the impression you were saying it was at a high level. So it sounded to me like it was at a higher, not at the same level of detail as what we might get in site plan control, but I guess I misunderstood.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Mr. Chair, it is somewhat high level. And looking at that grading and drainage plan in the year that plan was done, for example, that plan recommended swales to only be on one side of each property line. It appeared to have a bit of a break in the drainage plan where the front half of the properties would drain towards the north, the bottom half of the properties would naturally drain and slope towards the river. When we accept building permit applications, they're subject to the grading and drainage bylaw that's in effect today. So then more information needed to be added to that grading and drainage plan to reflect the current bylaw. In moving forward, because of the recent provincial rules and site plan control no longer being applicable on parcels of property like our waterfront properties, it's just really important for us to update that grading and drainage plan to make sure that we are looking at all aspects to avoid any, major concerns.
Thank you.
Are there any questions around the table? Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak? No? Do you have any more to add? All right, then I guess I'll move for a mover, it's Councillor McDonnell, seconder, Councillor Bucci. All right, all those in favor as it stands? Any of opposed? Seeing none, we'll carry that, and then we will then move to, I guess, the next part of the meeting. And thank you very much for your time. I forgot to do that for the first one. Sorry, Mr. Wilson, the first one. So the next meeting's to be determined.
We do expect to receive an application tomorrow, and if it's complete and we're able to circulate on Wednesday, then our next meeting will be on February 20th. If not, it'll be on March 6th.
All right, do I have a mover for adjournment? Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lang. All in favor? Seeing none that are opposed, carried. We'll adjourn this meeting at the call of the chair at 5:52 p.m. Thank you very much.